Good evening, everybody. How's it going? It's me, Comic Crack. Might be a quick one tonight because I didn't read a ton this week. Only read 3 books. Um, what I did do is watch a shitload of movies this week. This afternoon, we had the weekly chat on my channel here, just myself and Rasa this week. So if you want to go back and listen to that and see what we read and kind of take part in the discussion there or read the comments, I encourage you to go back and check that out. My thread was totally lost there. So I didn't read a ton. I ended up watching movies. I'd subscribed to the Arrow Video channel. They had a documentary on Jean Roland come out this last week, I guess Tuesday, right? Was Valentine's Day. Came out on Valentine's Day, almost like a 2-hour documentary on one of my favorite filmmakers. I've talked about him before on this channel a couple of times over the years. Really, really love the work of his that I've seen. I haven't seen all of it by any stretch, but I've seen a good chunk of it at this point. Redemption Video was putting out a bunch of his stuff. And then Arrow has a couple of things. I think even Criterion Channel had a couple of things. So what Arrow Films was doing on the app was, I think they had 3 or 4 different sort of, it was a part 1 of Roland through part 4, where it was showing like they were streaming a chunk of his videos at once, kind of releasing them all at the same time. Unfortunately, I can't get those up here in Canada. They were US and UK only, I think. And that would have to do with distribution rights, I assume, that they can't actually stream it in Canada. So I could see that they had it on there when I sign on to the app, but I couldn't watch the movies. Slightly disappointing because I would like to see. There's some gaps that I have. I haven't seen some of his early stuff, and I haven't seen some of like the later era stuff. I'm missing chunks of that I just haven't sat down and watched. So that was disappointing. Thankfully, though, I could see the documentary, and it was just great to get a snapshot of how he kind of got into filmmaking, what his ideas were of filmmaking, how he sort of stood out at that time and kind of all through his career. He never had a huge following. He ended up kind of abandoning this cinema fantastique, this fantastical kind of movie making that he was doing, this dreamlike kind of movie making that he was doing, and got into hardcore pornography, where I think there was probably a lot of money for him, or at least more than he was making before. He then eventually comes back and films some movies. One of the actresses that he sort of discovered while doing this porn was Brigitte Lally, I think is how you pronounce her last name. And if you know the movie Fascination, that was the first one that was kind of back to Jean Roland as kind of his self that she starred in. Incredible imagery throughout. It's one of the most infamous ones is her with this cloak holding a sigh that she's going to kind of, pardon me, get some retribution and flex her womanly power. And it's a phenomenal film. Really, really good. That one was on Criterion, so I was able to watch that. And that one is from, I made a couple of notes so I could remember. Fascination was 1979. And the documentary on him is called Orchestrator of Storms. And so if you want to check that out, it's well worth your time. Even if you're not familiar with him, it's a good snapshot of what movie making was like then, especially the stories of like when his first movie screened. There was riots in the street already. There was protests. I think it was 68 in France, right? If I'm getting the year correct. So his film gets shown in a theater, and it's this kind of surrealist, dreamy sort of fare, and the crowd goes absolutely nuts. Apparently, they started tearing seats out of the theater, throwing stuff at the screen, and it spilled out onto the streets. Not necessarily just due to his movie. It was just the atmosphere was already in the air. This sort of set them off in a little bit of a different direction. So very cool. What else did I see this week? I also got into some spaghetti westerns, which I used to watch a lot with my dad growing up. Obviously, the classics like the Trinity movies. with Terrence Hill. Is that his name? Terrence Hill. And then of course the Man with No Name, all those movies, Few Dollars More, Hang 'em High, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, etc. Sergio Leone movies. We watched a lot of those. And then as I got older, especially when I discovered through a friend of mine in Ontario, Criterion and places, I was able to see movies like Django, The Man Called Blade, etc. A bunch of those kind of movies. So that was something that I haven't watched a lot of in recent years, but it was great to see a few on Criterion and then a whole bunch on Arrow Video. I think there was about 10 or 12 currently on Arrow, and I've only worked through about 4 of them at this point. So I've still got a lot to go, which I'm excited. Massacre Time by Fulci is one that I'm going to be watching this week. That apparently is a classic. I'm not sure if I've seen it. I know I've seen the title a million times, but I don't know if I've actually seen it. But on Criterion, they had Westerns. They had a category of Westerns taking place in the snow. And one of those was The Great Silence. And with the amazing Klaus Kinski as kind of the lead villain in it. And anytime you see Klaus Kinski in these Westerns, you know you're in for a good one. He's such a striking presence on the screen. He eventually went on to work with Werner Herzog and a whole bunch of other people, not just him, but kind of infamous stories of his time working with Herzog. But man, was The Great Silence ever good. And it was one of those Ennio Morricone scores. I think it was conducted by Bruno Nicolai. Who later went on to do soundtracks himself and compose himself for a bunch of movies. Probably one of the strongest Morricone scores I've heard. As soon as the movie was done, I kind of went out. I've got a space that a friend of mine has loaned me for a little while to set up my music gear. So I go there a few nights a week for quite a few hours and just kind of play and getting ready to do some recording and stuff. So it's been, as soon as I watched it, I was in the car and listening to that soundtrack on the way there and back, and kind of took my time getting there, because just an amazing score by Morricone. Again, it's one of those times where you really think that it becomes apparent that every stitch of praise that a guy like he got, he deserved it and more. It's really, when you consider that he defined a genre and the way that genre sounded, but just what he was doing with those scores. Yes, hello AFPC, how are you? The Great Silence. It was a stunner, and apparently it's taken from history as well too. There's kind of a time in history where the bounty hunters were just becoming there was too many bounty hunters, and it was causing a little too much chaos. And the incident that is focused on in The Great Silence is about that time period and what became kind of the beginning of the end of the bounty hunter era. So it's a nice, good, gritty Western that is not very positive, to some degree. Like it's a bit of a downer, and that's a part of the genre that I do enjoy when it comes to that. So a really top-notch film. And then for Westerns, I also saw the first Sartana movie, which is I Am Sartana, Your Angel of Death from 1969. I think there was 4 of those. It didn't strike me as much of anything. It was a little more kind of like a television Western. There was moments in it that were good, but overall, I don't know, it just didn't really capture me like the way a good Western does. Another one that was a bit of a disappointment, because there was a lot of rave about it, was something called Requiescent. I'm not sure the year on that one. Similar kind of thing, though. The one positive that it had in it is Pierre Pasolini, the guy who did what is it, 90 Days of Sodom? Salo? He did Salo, that director. He had a bit part in that movie playing a priest. So that was pretty great, but he's such a small part of the movie that I was kind of hoping his character would add a little more. It wasn't a horrible Western, but I wouldn't put it kind of near the top, sort of mid-grade. The other Western that I saw that blew me away was also with, yes, Salo. Thank you, AFPC. The other one that blew me away was another one with, it's called And God Said to Cain from 1970, also starring Klaus Kinski, this time as kind of our hero in it. And that was another one that was kind of phenomenal. It was kind of like an 80s slasher movie, a decade before there were slasher movies. His character gets released from prison, serving a term of 10 years, coming back into this town to exact his revenge, as you start to find out as the movie progresses. At the same time he comes back, there's a tornado that's going to be touching down in the town. So all of the rest of the scenes that take place at night, when he's kind of picking off these people one by one, there's windstorms, there's shit going on. Everything is just chaotic. It's such an amazing premise. Hello, Gore Vidal. Evening. Pasolini was also a fine poet. I have a collection of his work. Oh, I didn't know that. I had no idea. So as he's kind of getting his revenge on everybody, one at a time, it's just so well done, and it's so great to see Kinski in a role where he's not he's normally the villain in these movies, but this one he's sort of the hero, as much as a Western has a hero, I guess. And it's so good. He's such he was such a striking human. His presence, anytime he walks into a room, his presence just fucking pours off of the screen. So that was a real highlight. General recommendations, honestly, like I could honestly say to you, AFPC, I'd go right into The Great Silence. I'd give that one a shot. And if you can find this and God Said to Cain, I would try those ones out. If you want to start kind of more with some of the ones that kind of are kind of entry points for a lot of people, you can start with the Django movies. Franco Nero is in a couple of the early Django movies, and as good as he is, and he's fantastic in them. I think it's Django Shoot, Run Till You Die, or something like that. And the actor's name is going to escape me now, but it's a different actor playing Django, and that's one of my favorite of the series. I think it might be the third or fourth in the series, and it's really going to bug me what his name is. Anyway, you could start with those, or of course the Sergio Leone. Any of those kind of ones with Clint Eastwood are always good. But honestly, as good as those ones are, and they really are fantastic, I like the ones that are kind of a little off that beaten track. The Man Called Blade is a really good one. But yeah, honestly, The Great Silence, you can't go wrong with that. I see in the comments you saw The Great Silence. I have it on DVD. Hard to believe Kinski is Natasha's father. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that I've seen The Great Silence in the past, Gore Vidal, probably like almost 20 years ago at this point. So I had forgotten most of it. So it was so good to see it again. It's probably the highlight. Yeah, outside of True Grit, The Searchers, Good and Bad, etc. Yeah. It was such a highlight in all of the spaghetti westerns that I've seen. Great Silence is right up there at the top. It just really blew me away. What else did I see this week? I did watch a Jess Franco movie, Eugenie Desaad, and Bruno Nicolai did the soundtrack for that one. Who he's, like I said earlier, he worked with Ennio Morricone. That was good. I mean, it was Jess Franco, so I knew fully what to expect. I personally love Jess Franco. Even his really bad ones are still entertaining. This was absolutely on that lower end, even for Jess, but I did really like it. There's just something about his style of filmmaking. There's something about the everything about it, the music, the eroticism, him putting himself in all of his movies in these various roles. It was a good one, and I believe the actress was also the same actress that appeared in Vampiros Lesbos, which is one of his most infamous movies. I believe it's the same actress from that. And then finally, just to wrap up the new stuff, the two newer movies that I saw last night, my son and I watched Triangle of Sadness. It's good to see Hostiles starring Christian Bale with The Searchers. Okay, I don't know Hostiles. We watched Triangle of Sadness last night. I was super excited to see it after seeing the trailer. I just recently heard that I guess it's up for an Oscar, which I don't follow that stuff, but I'd heard it somewhere. I'm not sure where, probably on social media somewhere. And I don't know if that idea sort of burrowed its way into the deep recesses of my brain and kind of swayed how I was automatically going to think of this movie. Because if you're up for a Oscar, I don't think that you're probably much of a movie. That's any more so than you just became a blockbuster and you greased some palms, you know. And that's my own bias towards that whole organization. I'd recommend Meek's Cutoff by Kelly Reichardt. If you haven't seen it, as a great anti-Western. I have not seen it, but you've got my attention with that one. One of my favorite Westerns is Big Country, directed by William Wyler. Start Greg Peck, Gene Simmons, Houston probably, Carol Baker, and Burl Ives. Great score too. Sounds like Copeland. Excellent. So Triangle of Sadness had this kind of appeal on seeing the trailer, and I can honestly say that as I watched it, I had quite a few laughs. I was enjoying it for the most part, especially I'd say the first half of the movie. Once it kind of passed that point, it started kind of changing a little bit for me, where when we finished watching, I wasn't really sure what I thought of it. When I woke up this morning, I kind of realized I didn't like it. It seemed a little too easy. It's this real kind of push at most of the first half of the movie takes place on this like luxury yacht with these very vapid capitalist type of rich snobs, and it's a lot of things that you would expect. And like I said, there was some legitimate laugh out loud moments, but I felt kind of the next day that laughing at those things, I felt a little cheap. Like some cheap floozy from the bar getting taken advantage of, because they were very cheap laughs. It was very kind of surface level criticism of kind of capitalism and sort of making fun of everybody. People who would kind of identify as like socialists or Marxists or capitalists or whatever, or communists. It dealt with a lot of like the class struggle within kind of this world of the yacht, like the people that were serving the guests, and then the people that were actually like washing the toilets, that seemed that were all kind of Filipino people. So it was really, it played with that, which was interesting, but it didn't kind of go far enough. The parts that I did really enjoy, there's some great pleasure out of the camera starts rocking like this because the whole the boat is kind of hitting some treacherous waters, and they're having their captain's dinner where they're eating all this fancy seafood and scarfing this down, and you can see them starting to get green. So you get a good kind of, I don't know, 10-minute stretch with various rich people just vomiting on themselves, shitting uncontrollably, sliding across the floor in their own puke and shit. So there was some really nice moments for sure, but I just feel like it didn't go far enough. Like, if you're going to give us this kind of story, I would have loved to have seen it go into kind of the absurd, or just be incredibly cruel and very, very pointed. It just didn't seem pointed enough. It almost felt like it almost felt kind of like, these trolls that are online that are just kind of like making fun of everybody, basically saying, you're all idiots and let's just make fun of, like, it sort of felt like it was coming from that place. I can't speak for him as a director and the writer and stuff. I don't know that that's what it is. That's how it read to me. It seemed just too kind of basic. I would have loved to have seen a little more pointed criticism. And like I said, I would have loved if it would have just pushed right into the absurd, like give us the absolute absurd. And that's kind of what I expected from seeing the trailer. So it didn't deliver in that way. I'm glad I saw it. I don't regret watching it. I didn't hate it. It's just the next day, it just kind of sat with me a little different. Where I don't know if I would recommend it. The Menu too deals explicitly with class consciousness and obscene extractive wealth in a horror comedy approach. Well, that's two you've got for me, because I don't know that one either AFPC. So thank you for both of those. And then finally, the one I want to talk about before we actually look at comics, we'll take a little sidetrack through one last movie, which will lead us to some music. Yes, Le Grand Bouffe, yeah, about four men who want to end their lives by eating until it kills them. Excellent film starring Marcello Mastroianni. Yes, I feel like I've seen that a lifetime ago. One of the other ones that's really making the rounds and is really kind of stirring everybody's interest is Skinamarink, and it's not a kids movie. A very low budget horror movie, I guess you could call it. It was making the rounds. A lot of people were raving about it, and I thought I would have to watch it on Shudder. It was a Shudder exclusive. IFC also put some funding towards it as well. So I guess because it caused such a stir and there were so many people raving about it, they kind of opened it up to a theatrical release across the country here. I'm assuming in places in the States too, but I was kind of following it as it was going to various places here in Canada. It made it to our city. It was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, just 3 nights at our local Cinematheque, or our local art house theater. Really small theater, smaller screen, not surround sound. Yes, Discreet Charm of the Bourgeois I've seen as well too. That's a classic. Menu just came out a few months ago. Okay, that's good to know. I'm so glad that I went to see it in the theater. I'm so glad we didn't watch it on TV. It would have been fantastic on the TV, and I think I might watch it again. It's one of those films that I'd like to see a couple of times, I think. But seeing it in the theater with people in that environment felt really good. And one of the reasons is because of the way that it's filmed. It's one of those movies that I could also say you can see the trailer and not be worried about any sort of spoilers. The only thing that it sort of spoils for you, I guess, is it really gives you a sense of the atmosphere that you're going to be absorbed in for like 100 minutes. I think it's 100 minutes or so. I loved it. I thought it was really incredible. The sound design in it was kind of perfect, which is where I want to touch on when we look at some of this weirdo noise stuff I have standing by, because it reminded me of that. Apparently he got some influence from Blood of a Poet by Jean Cocteau, if I'm saying that right, if I'm remembering right, which was 1930 movie. I think it's about 50 minutes. It's just under an hour. There was somebody online, Harry Nordlinger, I think, from Vacuum Decay, the comic. He had boosted a tweet from somebody else that was comparing those two movies, taking kind of stills from both of them and looking at the similarities. So I don't know if it was a direct influence on the director of Skinamarink, but seeing these similarities really piqued our interest, where me and my son are going to watch Blood of a Poet next weekend to kind of see it while Skinamarink is still fresh in our minds. So again, thankfully, Criterion has put out that stuff in the past. So they have 2 Cocteau movies on their streaming service. I can't remember the name of the other one off the top of my head. So when you come to creating an atmosphere in film, that feels like it's something that, as we kind of get further away from stuff that I might have been used to in the 80s, VHS, that kind of grainy quality, it really gives it has a new life in 2023 because of that distance. And because of that kind of technology, it's not that it's obscure technology. It's just that we've really moved away from that with these crystal clear images and things. I thought it was so beautifully done. The lighting in it was fantastic. The framing, everything that's framed, you're only catching bits and pieces. I hesitate to tell you too much about the story because I do feel like you need to go in blind. But I would love it if, especially people that watch this channel, AFPC, Gore Vidal, anybody who watches this channel, I would love for you guys to see it, because I would love to hear your thoughts on it without me kind of spoiling it, because I would love to talk to somebody about it in a little more detail besides just my son. Me and my son had a couple of great conversations about it, but I would love to kind of hear what people think about it. The other thing that impressed me so much was the sound design. This is a movie that lives for the sound design. It feels like the visuals for an incredible abstract. It's called Skinamarink, Skinamarink. And like I said, please watch the trailer. It really doesn't spoil anything for you. It gives you kind of a good flavor of what you're going to witness. So I'd encourage you to watch the trailer and don't worry about, and then don't read anything else about it though. Don't listen to any videos, don't listen to anybody, then just go into it. The sound design was so beautifully done. So many nice textures, so many moments where you're straining like that. One of the things that I love about some of this experimental music is this idea of active listening. You really have to pay attention. And with a movie like Skinamarink, you're not only paying attention visually because you're looking for clues, you're looking for things in the images, you're also really paying attention to the audio, because there's no kind of meter to it. There's no back and forth with dialogue. There's random sounds of a house, of stuff that you don't really know, creaks and moans. Is that a person? Was that just the bathroom toilet flushing? What is going on? Is that steps? So it really draws you in a completely different way, where I was completely absorbed in it. It's pretty rare that I can't watch a movie. There was a few scenes I had to avert my eyes because I was really anxious about what was going to come onto the screen. That's a pretty good effect. So the reason I wanted to quickly talk about the sound design is because one of the things that it reminded me of was one of my favorite kind of performance art, noise artist kind of troops, I guess, the Schimpflug group. So Rudolf Eber here on the front cover of this, As Loud as Possible. Joke Lans and Dave Phillips make up the core of the Schimpflug group. There's another guy, Daniel, can't remember his last name, actually. They deal with a lot of sound design type of performance art. Their stuff is a lot about performance art. So bringing in the audience, kind of invading that space between the performer and the audience, and being also very confrontational. Dave Phillips is a enormous, he's a vegan, and his performances, one of the DVDs that we have that I still haven't watched the whole thing because it's so disturbing, is this Dave Phillips Proceed with Inquiry, which is a collection of live performances. And in these performances, not only is the audio kind of hitting you, he's got a lot of imagery of like slaughterhouses of animals being killed for food. And it's 180 minutes, and it's some of the most intense stuff. But I bring them up in relation to the Skinamarink because of their use of sound design, because of their use, especially a guy like Rudolf Eber, I would say out of all of them, he uses silence to kind of heighten the intense experience that you're already getting. So this is a collection, it's a CD, and then it's a collection of some photography, which I won't show you too much of because it's might be disturbing to some, but there's a sample just on the front cover of the CD that comes with this. So the use of that silence to kind of heighten any sort of sound that comes after that silence, and any sort of feeling that you might get from it, is a really amazing thing. And I thought that Skinamarink did the exact same thing. Here's another Rudolf Eber CD. Lots of fleshy bits in all of his photography and art. Here's Joke Lans. He performs also as a Sudden Infant. Some good stuff, Sudden Infant stuff that I've heard. I'm not as much of a fan of it. I like the Dave Phillips, but the Rudolf Eber and Renzel Stern and Gurgle stock stuff is the is the music that I really respond to. Dave Phillips also was in this hardcore band called The Fear of God. So this compilation is a bunch of bands doing covers of Fear of God stuff, and it's beautiful. One of the best albums from this group. Oh, and here's one with Masana, I think, is in this one too. Yeah, I believe Masana is playing with them. Yeah, Yamazaki is here. So this is, you can see Fish Guts and Noise and silence of like, no, just not digital silence, just silence, like just even if it's, sometimes it's just a space, but honestly, sometimes it may very well be a digital silence, AFPC. That's a very good question. Sometimes it may very well be digital silence because it is so quiet. But sometimes on some of his recordings, you'll hear kind of like the atmospheric sound, whether it's like lights buzzing or something. You'll hear a sound of some sort of space that you're never really you never really know exactly what's in that space. So it's kind of a combination. It really depends on the album. Another Dave Phillips classic here. This is a great one. I don't even know what the heck the title is on this one. Yeah, it's just called Six is this one. And this is Rudolf Eber artwork on this as well too. And then track listings there. And then another Dave Phillips one called Four. And one of my favorites, so it's a couple of people from this Shimfluck group. It's called Ohne, O-H-N-E. This is probably one of the best noise albums, experimental performance. I don't even know what to classify this as sometimes. One of the best albums I think I've heard in that genre. O-H-N-E is the band, and you can find some live performances of theirs on YouTube. I would encourage you, if any of this sounds vaguely interesting to you, especially the two of you that are here with me right now, give it a shot. It's amazing because they mix some of that confrontational kind of noisier elements with some really amazing singing as well. Daryl D, how are you? Yes, that's a hell of a cover for sure. I've got a bunch of records and stuff too. I didn't pull all of that stuff out because it would just end some more tapes and things. This was their 20th anniversary of the Shimfluck group. So it came with a couple of tapes. There's the back cover there. Came with a couple of tapes. One by Sudden Infant, one by Dave Phillips, and then Eber did a CD as well there. And some of the art, I'll just show you a couple of pieces of the art. So it came with a bunch. It's from Nihilist, this record label or this tape label called Nihilist, which was, what's his name? He did Panicsville. Andy Ortman is his name. That was his label. Andy Ortman also has a good record, a radio show that you can find online. I can't remember the title of it right now, but if you search Andy Ortman radio, something will come up. So all of that to say that Skinamarink kind of blew me away in a number of different ways. And the biggest way was with kind of this sound design. They're not using silence because of the quality of the film and things. There was a lot of, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to stop myself. I really don't want to talk too much more about the film because I really don't want to spoil it. I really feel that you need to go into it not knowing too much else. But sound is always important in film. And I think especially working on film sets, it was one of the things that I found people often forget working on set. Whatever, who cares about the sound? The sound is so fucking important, man. It puts you in a time and a place. If that sound doesn't match the images, it can have a couple of different effects. It can have an amazing effect to really contrast sound and image. You can really do some wonderful things with it. But if you're going for any sort of immersion and you're going for something that's going to be representative of the time, you need that good sound on set so you can get that environment and you can get that space that they were in. I think it's crucial. So when you start playing with those sound elements like they do in Skinamarink, I feel like it really adds to that environmental. And like I said, it really added for me that immersion. I love getting immersed in some of these things. And I found that I was just kind of digging deeper and deeper. So yeah, sound is the primary medium you work in. Oh, very, very nice, AFPC. Let's see what I missed. Sorry if I missed some comments here. You're going to have to define these for me, AFPC, a mix of diegetic and non-diegetic. You'll have to define those for me. I never paid attention to noise music until I met Terrence. Made me think twice about it and give it a chance. Yeah, cool. I'm glad to hear that, Gore. Crazy looking cover. Will do. Yes, that on the own thing. OHNE. Yeah, give it a shot. So that's it for movies. It was just such an amazing week of film watching that I just wanted to share with those of you who always join me here, because I feel like people in my audience who watch, especially tune in to the live streams, probably have a similar interest in film and all sorts of things, not just comics. So yeah, I'd be very curious if you see any of these. Just let me know what you think. So onto the books that I read. There was only 3 this week. If you were here for the afternoon, you've seen me talk about them. I don't really have too much to add, but we'll quickly go through them anyway for people who aren't necessarily fans of watching the couple of hour live stream. Diegetic, in world, causal, non-diegetic, apart from causal relationship on screen. Okay, so sound that, like I was saying already, sound that kind of comes from what you're seeing visually, and then non-diegetic, so sound that doesn't necessarily have a relationship to the imagery. Am I capturing that? Issue number 1 from Silverwolf. This is Nightmaster. This is a Tim, what the hell is his name now? Vigil, Tim Vigil. Early-ish Tim Vigil work. This is 1987 from Silverwolf Comics. I read this last night, and it was so fun. It was a really nice way to kind of end the night. The beautiful thing about these 50-cent and dollar bin comics, Rasa and I were talking about it after the stream. We usually hang out for a little bit after the streams and just kind of chat about family and whatever else is on our mind. One of the things we were talking about was the beauty of these kind of cheap bins. One of the things that, speaking personally, was more difficult when I was kind of doing the Wednesday Warrior, getting comics every single week. There was so many books that I was getting at one point that I was probably spending $300 to $400 a month. So roughly around the $75 to $100 a week ish. Yes. Yeah, I enjoy it as well too. It's really nice because it doesn't even really stand out with the imagery. Like when I first saw it in the bin, I had to kind of do a close look at it as to what the fuck am I seeing there? What is this book called? Yeah. And one of the things that made it difficult when you're on that Wednesday seesaw or carousel is that the amount of money that you're spending on these books, there's certain expectations that you then have. This is one of my favorite pages. I love this. And as AFPC pointed out this afternoon, good old Mad Balls reference right there. There's this, you're a little more critical, I find. And I don't find that criticism is often productive because I found, again, speaking for myself, I found that I'm attaching the money to it. If I'm spending all this money, if I'm putting this money towards this, you have to present me with something, you know, so that became what passes as criticism, you know, within that kind of world. It can lead to that. I hear you, Jared Osborne. Don't come at me for saying a statement like that. You know what I mean. So it can lead to that sort of base criticism where I feel that it's potentially coming from the money that you're spending on the book. One of the joys of hitting these 50-cent and dollar bins is none of that is there, because if the book is shit, you've only spent 50 cents on it or $1. And then on the flip side, if it's kind of like this, mediocre, it becomes a little more fun than it probably deserves to be. And then when you find those hits, when you find those books that really resonate, for me, when I discover Ashley Dust, when I discover books like that, like then I'm blown away. I can't believe this is just hanging out in these cheap bins and nobody is raving about this shit. And this doesn't cost like $20 a book. I'm glad that it doesn't. But so there's a different kind of relationship with these 50-cent books. All of that to go to say that I really enjoyed this book. I think there was a couple of other issues. I really should look on Lone Star. They advertise in issue number 4 in the back of the book here. So I assume that it went that far, but I guess with this era, you can never assume any such thing. These titles kind of came and went. It frees you up to take so many chances on criminally. Yeah, 100% it does. That's exactly right. I'm way more willing to gamble if something looks halfway interesting. If it's in a 50-cent bin, add it to the pile. Especially with some of the amazing comic sellers that I have here in town, who are so good to me, like way too good to me. I know that they'll probably end up giving me an extra discount as well too, which is incredibly nice because I think I'm the only one in the city that's buying this stuff. Because when I try to trade some of this away, no motherfuckers in this town want this. I'm the only one. So, yeah. Poetry hiding in those quarter bins. Yeah. And just a really unique voice. One of the things I've been thinking about lately is that idea of, Colin and I joke about it, like the 80s being the golden age. But one of the things that, again, Colin and I have spoken about is Alan Moore talking about comics used to be for the blue collar. They used to be for the working class. They were working class entertainment because it was really cheap. You could get some great stories. So in my mind, what better golden age to have than the 80s and the 90s? Well, especially the 80s, when all of those casual 9-to-5, hardworking blue collar people can now contribute to comics. They can look to have a voice in that world and talk about things that they want to talk about, or tell stories that they want to tell, or take chances on things, or put their art out in the world. I think that's an incredible thing. And if you've known me any sort of time period in having this channel, you know that I'm very much about that kind of idea, hearing from a lot of different voices, especially within art. I love to hear voices of people who may have only done a couple of comics, or 1 or 2 cassette tapes that they made 50 copies of, or whatever it happens to be, or a short film, etc. Right? So I love that stuff. On a comic note, late to the artist, but ordered Junji Ito's Tomy at my shop. I saw a Yuko pop with a slug coming out of the girl's mouth. Curious. I bought it and a Tomy pop. That's excellent. Nothing like that at my shop's quarter bins. Yeah, and it depends on where you are. Workers taking control of the means of production. Absolutely. And disseminating their messages and talking to each other through this other cheap means, right? Like, I think that that's so crucial. Having a chance to participate instead of just being kind of the mark that everything is marketed towards, you know what I mean? Like, actually having a chance to contribute in that space, I think is enormously important. So the last 2 books, we'll talk about these 2 Jippy books. Small press blood. Yeah, you and me both. I just love, there's nothing better than finding some great records in, I remember a lifetime ago finding some early electronic records. We're talking like 60s experimental, more like guys in lab coats, electronic music, with using tape machines and all these kind of this newer computer technology. For I think $1 a piece, I found about 10 of these albums. I didn't know what any of them were, plucked them out of those places. It's so great. And it's the same thing with comics. Like, you find these cheap bins, there's almost nothing more fun than just digging through a bin and seeing a bunch of comics that you've never heard of, that you don't even know what the hell they are, from companies you've never heard of, that probably lasted about 5 minutes. I love that stuff. I think that's such a joy. Locally, black and white comics are frowned on by many of the customers. They won't read them. Yeah, and I think that was a thing even at the time. I've said it before on these streams. That happened. I remember that time reading those black and white comics, even into the 90s when I was reading them, and people hearing that conversation that if it's black and white, that's not a real comic. It's got to have color, etc. So it's still a thing that happens to now. Yeah, exactly. Private Press Records 2, so vital, just crackling with a different energy. So my first two Jippy books, Rasa had talked about Jippy in one of our hangouts on Sunday. I've heard multiple other people talk about Jippy. I've seen his stuff on Fantagraphics. Finally dug in. My library had only these two books, and I'm glad I read them now because they're due back tomorrow, I think, so I'll be able to drop them off. This is GarageBand. So one of them is color, a little bit of a shorter volume, and the other one is black and white, and it's a much beefier volume. I really liked both of these. I think I liked Land of the Suns, which I'll talk about in a second, a little bit more, but this one really fed my nostalgia for when I played in bands. I played in bands my whole life, jamming in friends' garages, playing in shitty punk rock bands at Battle of the Bands shows downtown, playing the Royal Albert, getting into experimental music, going on tour, playing, just making a racket, playing like noise shows, traveling out to Victoria, small little trips. By no stretch were we any sort of like, in any of the bands that I've been in, by no stretch were we some big touring money making thing, not even close. But it was just so much fun. We had such a blast doing it. It was a great excuse just to hang out with people. When we started playing live shows, it was such a thrill to have our friends come out and see us play live. There's a local bar here, the Royal Albert Arms, that so many people, especially from my generation, grew up in. It was the first bar I went to see bands when I was underage. When we finally made it to play on that stage, we played on that stage quite a few times with a bunch of really great bands, opening for some really great bands. It was such a thrill to actually be on stage with our friends, especially those early shows. It was literally us and a bunch of our friends hanging out there. It's not like we drew a bigger audience or anything, but we put the money in to get a chance to play, and it was a real thrill. So that's what this book gives me. This book gives me this thrill of these kind of young punk teenagers, very energetic, all from different walks of life, all kind of getting in shit, and just making a racket. And one of the things I talked about, I'm very much not talking about more of the meat in here. There's a lot more to this book than what I'm saying. When you get into the individual stories, when you get a little more of a sense of their life, there's much more to it than what I'm letting on, basically. One of the things that I did enjoy, though, is at the end of every chapter, you get to see them full blown playing one of their songs. And as the book goes on, more shirts come off till they're finally all bare chested and just really giving it everything that they've got as they kind of talk about their different songs. And I can hear the music in my head as I look at these pages. And it's a really beautiful thing. It was just such a great time period. I look back on it mostly with fondness. There's some things that I don't look back on with fondness whatsoever, but that's okay. The overall vibe of growing up and playing music with people, even if it was just fucking horrible. One of the Battle of the Bands that we played, we were, I think to this day, I truly think like we had something going with that band. We needed to practice way more than we did. The crowd hated us because with these Battle of the Bands, everybody would just bring a big crew of their friends and they would cheer them on. They fucking hated us. So every band was owed an encore. They had to give every band an encore. I had written a song that was probably about 8 minutes long. So when we got off stage, I said, we're playing it. And everybody went along with it because all of us were kind of pissed off and fed up. We ended up getting into a fight with the sound man. The singer got in a fight with the audience. We got kind of chased off the stage. And it was an absolute fucking blast. It was just amazing. Anyway. Yeah, so it was a really fun book. Very, very entertaining read. So I really liked it. And seeing his artwork and seeing him use color in this one, I thought was really, really great. I think Rasa was telling me this afternoon that the book that she read, someone else was doing the color for him. This one, he's the only one credited. And the thing that I didn't show off this afternoon was at the back, there's some studies for GarageBand. So just a few pages where he looks at, like, you see some of his early character design work and poses and getting them into their posturing, some samples there. Yeah, I mean, the crowd was fucking, they hated our fucking guts, man. They hated us, which just at that time, it really egged us on. You hate us, huh? Here's another one for you. We just kept going, right? So because we were under no, we were not naive to think that we ever really stood a chance, because our stuff didn't sound like everybody else who played, because we'd seen so many Battle of the Bands. We'd gone to so many of them. We knew what kind of stuff was going to win, and we knew that we weren't it. We just wanted to do it anyway. I can't check out books from a library because if I like the book, I want to keep that copy. It's not rational, of course, but that explains why I have so many books. Yeah, I'm finding that with a couple of the ones that I've taken out recently. I'm making a list. This Land of the Suns is one that I want to keep a hold of, and then the Book of Disquiet. I'm about 60 pages into it, and I want a copy of that book now too, because I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Nothing quite like playing shows before you've learned to play your instruments. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and at that point we were a punk band for sure. And then eventually I joined a kind of like stoner rock type of band. I got approached at one point to play with a death metal band, but I wasn't into death metal at the time. And so I said no. And that's the one thing in my music past that I really regret. I wish I would have taken that chance. I wish I would have explored that just to kind of give that a shot. It's good to have disdain for your audience. Yeah, sometimes, especially if you know what you're walking into, you know. Fuck you guys. We're here for beer. Yeah, it was great. Anyway, Land of the Suns is the next one here by Jippy. And this one is 2022. No, maybe not. Hold on. Let's check. No, not even close. 2018 is when this one came out. It was originally released in 2016. This Fantagraphics one was 2018. This was a hell of a story, man. And it's another one of those stories that it's a great thing when you can step away from a story and kind of think about it over the next couple of days or revisit it, which is also part of why I love doing these Sunday kind of hangouts and these Sunday wraps. I love to revisit the stuff that I've read during the week. It really puts it in a different place for me. And this one has kind of grown on me even more. I may try to go through it again once tomorrow before I return it. It's kind of a post-apocalyptic world where our main characters are these two brothers who live with their father. They're kind of sent out often, or they take off on their own to kind of hunt for food and look for and just get into shit, to just get into trouble. So they find a dog and they kill a dog. I said this afternoon that they found a dead one. I mixed up my stories. That's when the father tells this other guy where they found this dog, that they found it dead. They kill this dog, and on their way back to see their to see their father. They find some dead bodies, and one of the brothers wants to take a human bone with them. Let me see if I can find the pages here. Yeah, so he wants to take a bone with them. And the other brother says, if you take that, our dad will know that that we've gone out of the zone of where he's allowed us to go. You can't bring that back, because if he finds out we've gone further than we were supposed to, he's going to be really pissed. And there's a beautiful shot of when he throws the bone back onto the grass. That contrast of going from a page like this to a dense page like that is great. So it's about their survival in this new world and these lessons that their father is trying to teach them, although he's not doing it in a way that, I don't know, is breeding. I think he feels that he's breeding this toughness in them, and they absolutely have that. There's no doubt about it, but there's something kind of missing. Yeah, it's another book where I hesitate to say too much, because the journey going through this book is so enjoyable. Seeing, because you're never really told exactly why the world is the way that it is. There's always the sense that just outside of their boundaries, there's going to be something else that's going to provide us more answers. And that kind of border always kind of keeps pushing a little bit farther as you follow through the story. So you're left with still not getting a complete story of the world, but you're getting this nice moment of this kid's life where he's making some realizations and saying it out loud like that. That's really the sense that you get from GarageBand too. He's really good at kind of giving you a snapshot of a moment in time for the characters, where, again, it's something that I've talked about a million times on the channel. I love finding these stories where you can feel the history of the characters. You can feel that they're developed, and you can feel that they have a past outside of the book, that once you close the book, there's still more that they're going to be experiencing, and there's more life they're going to live. I love that. And I think that is such a difficult thing to do, and make that sound and feel natural. So I feel like he does that pretty well with both of these books, because for GarageBand, I could read a couple of more volumes of those characters and I'd be completely entertained. This one, I feel like you could do another one and you could give some more answers, but I don't know if I want more answers. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I think that would take away from what makes this book so good, having all of those answers, or having another volume that starts to, tie up the world a little bit more. So, yeah, both great. I think I like this one a little bit more. And again, like, this black and white artwork is really just gorgeous. The amount of work he does in these panels is so good. So yeah, that's a highlight for sure. Death metal is a whole other level of crazy. Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, I eventually really got into death metal and grindcore and all this kind of extreme metal. I loved it. So I wish I would have kind of dug into it just to give it a shot. Glad you're still working your way through Pessoa. Yeah, and I gotta say, like, some of it is very difficult for me. I have to read it a few times. But I wish I would have brought the book down, because I wanted to kind of share one of the little passages that really resonated with me, but I forgot to bring it down, and I'm not sure where I'd put it upstairs. So it's good. I do really like it, and I'm very curious to read more about him as a person too. I'm gonna have to renew, and these other thick tomes of books that I decided to get for myself, I'm just gonna have to return and make a note of them and take them out again, because there's no way I'm going to finish that book and then also tackle Jerusalem. Like, it's just not gonna happen. So I'm gonna have to return this and make a note to take it out again, because I do really want to try to tackle at least a portion of this and see if how much I can get into it. And it's the same with this. I read bits and pieces, this Life, a User's Manual, and it's been interesting as well too, and one I'd love to dig into, but I'm just not going to be able to dig into both of them. It won't happen. So I'll make notes and get them again. Yeah, definitely lovely drawing for sure. Steeltown Rockers is a great band comic. I just recalled. If you haven't read it, it doesn't sound familiar to me. I'll keep an eye out. So what else do I have? That's it, I think. Yep, that's it. Like I said, really light reading week because um, movies just dominated my week, and it was glorious. As much as I love more Pessoa's prose is leaps and bounds above. Yeah, and I feel like it's digging into something deeper or different, possibly. But we'll see. Who am I to say? Yeah, but I mean that Moore book just is like, holy shit, man. It's intense. That's it. Thank you very much, everybody, for hanging out. We'll be back next weekend on Sunday over on Rasa's channel. Those of you in the chat who have sent emails to, feel free to keep that thread going. I meant what I said in those. I think it would be great to have even off of YouTube hangouts and just chats and things. So keep in touch, fellas. And thank you very much. Oh, Lealoha Art. Yes. Okay. I do know it now. Now I know it. Yes, I haven't read it, but I know exactly which one you're talking about. And we'll see you next week, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. Daryl D. Gore Vidal, AFPC. Later, fellas.